When Jason and Sally took their deaf son to the zoo for the first time, they were excited to see how he would react. But when the baby stopped in front of the lion enclosure, the lion did something unexpected that left everyone shocked. Jason and Sally had dreamed of having a baby from the moment they met. They were both in their mid-30s and knew they would never find a better partner to raise a family with. They married shortly after their first date and immediately began trying to get Sally pregnant. But it quickly became apparent that it wasn't going to be easy. The wait was heartbreaking, but after a year of trying, they were finally blessed with the news they were hoping for. They were thrilled at the prospect of finally having the child they had been praying for all along. Sally followed all the protocols to ensure that her pregnancy was successful and healthy, but she really struggled with it. From conception to birth, she felt very sick the whole time. However, the doctors were not too concerned, as they said that the nausea was totally natural. According to them, some women have a hard time during pregnancy, and that's all. However, their narrative changed very quickly once the little one was born. At first, he seemed healthy enough, but at just 6 weeks old, it started to become clear that something was wrong with him. The little baby would cry for hours, and no matter what lullaby Sally sang or what noise machine they used, he just wouldn't calm down. He wouldn't react to loud noises either, and on one particular occasion, Sally finally figured out what was wrong with her baby. He was only 7 weeks old, and they were renovating the house. She liked to take the baby out to get away from the noise, but that day she had to stay in the house. She prepared herself to deal with a hysterical baby who would cry all the time because of all the construction noise, but the tantrums never happened. The little baby slept as if there was no noise at all. Alarm bells started ringing in Sally's head. She was sure this couldn't be normal, so she and her husband decided to take their son straight to the pediatrician for some tests. They were immediately referred to an audiologist since it was his hearing that was of most concern. Indeed, once the test was done, it was confirmed that their little boy was deaf. They realized that he must have been born that way, and the matter was not taken up again until later. Sally and Jason began to worry a lot about their son. Naturally, they were concerned about how the diagnosis would affect his life. They would have to make some serious adaptations to their way of life in order to accommodate their son's condition. They grieved for the life they hoped their son would have and promised each other to try to support him as best they could. They wanted him to have as normal a childhood as possible, so they continued to raise him with love and care, but with sign language instead of verbal communication. And despite this small inconvenience, the baby soon grew into a happy and curious child. It quickly became apparent that their son was drawn to wild animals in any form. He would light up every time they read safari stories or showed him a documentary. They were elated to notice that they were so interested in them. They bonded with him over their love for lions, elephants, and giraffes, just to name a few. Sally and Jason learned in sign language the names of all the animals he loved to further his passion. Even though he was small, they were increasingly hopeful that with this passion, their son could lead a life where he didn't feel so different. After all, animals can be more compassionate than humans. Then, when their little boy turned 1, they decided to take him to the zoo for the first time. He was just starting to get around, so they knew he would have fun crawling around and looking at the animals. But they could never have anticipated what was going to happen. The little family had been at the zoo for just under an hour when they finally reached the African section. That was where they knew their son would be most excited. He would get to see all of his favorite animals in one place. So far, he had seen quite a few animals from all over the world. As they walked around, Sally took note of which ones he seemed to like the most and wrote down the name, as she was determined to teach him the names of the animals in sign language. From the moment her son saw his first giraffe, he immediately realized he was in paradise. His little face lit up and he started trying to get out of his stroller. Jason simply laughed and released his son from his seatbelt. The little boy headed for the glass enclosure as he laughed. He would turn to his parents and point to the word giraffe over and over again. Sally and Jason had tears of happiness in their eyes. They could hardly believe how happy their little boy was. Then suddenly he got distracted and ran into another enclosure. From the beginning, they weren't quite sure what animal resided in that area, but when they saw the sign, they realized it was the lion enclosure. Their little baby simply plopped down on the ground outside the enclosure and gazed at his reflection in the glass. What he couldn't see was the big alpha male lion that had taken an interest in him. Sally first noticed him when the animal quietly came down from where he had been sleeping and walked over to the glass where the baby was sitting. Sally immediately began recording a video of the interaction. She expected that when her son turned around and saw the lion, he would be overjoyed. She could never have anticipated what was actually about to happen. Out of nowhere, the big lion pounced on the glass where the baby was. At first, Sally and Jason thought the big animal was just playing, but then it reared up again and leaped once more in the baby's direction, slamming into the thick glass between them. It was then that they realized that the lion was actually trying to attack the little one. They were horrified to see it, but fortunately their son had not yet noticed. Jason took the baby in his arms and put some distance between them on the glass. However, when his son saw the lion for the first time, he squealed with delight. He was completely unaware of what had happened a few minutes earlier. Sally and Jason were puzzled by the encounter, but happy that their son hadn't noticed. After all, the last thing they wanted was for him to be afraid of an animal he loved so much. The couple called a zoo employee and showed him the video. The employee chuckled and explained that this particular lion was known to play pranks on people who got too close to the glass in his enclosure. Turns out the lion wasn't very old, so he still had that playful side. It was kind of like a teenager playing a prank on an adult. Sally and Jason realized that the lion had indeed been playing as they had first thought, and they sighed in relief. They knew he couldn't have hurt their baby through the glass, but they were still glad to know that he hadn't even tried. And in a strange turn of events, they were also thankful for their son's deafness, because it had prevented him from turning toward the lion and witnessing that terrifying scene. The little family continued their tour of the zoo, and their son was simply fascinated. It was clear that this would be one of his favorite things to do on the weekends for quite some time. Sally and Jason decided to save the lion video for when he got older, thinking that maybe then he would be able to appreciate it for what it was. They wanted him to continue to like animals as he grew up, to not be afraid of them, and maybe someday he would work alongside the same employee who had introduced them to a prankster lion. What an amazing story! How would you have felt if a wild animal had done this to your child? And to what extent would you encourage your child to love wild animals? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.